So thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. And I think this is a splendid opportunity because there has been so much talk of decolonization and no action. And I'm really surprised because we have been doing this for the last about 8 years in various other countries. Now, how come you haven't actually even found out about it? So I think this is one of the things that I would like to talk about, I would like to start with, that we had this multiversity which was focusing on changes in the curriculum. Fees was not our agenda. And fees was not our agenda for a simple reason that, thank you so much. I don't have to hold it. Oh, this is only for you. Okay. Okay. So, as you know, this ancient University of Nalanda existed for 1,000 years without fees. It survived on the revenue from 10 villages around. And my own education and that of my children was mostly done without fees. Well, there was some fees. I think it was about 3 ZAR per month in the college. And this happens to be the best college in science in Delhi and probably in India. So I'm quite accustomed to this sort of a model, and it is not something which concerned us. So we focused on the curriculum. I think it's a viable model to work without fees. So I want to just start off with certain common caricatures. You're rejecting everything Western. And I think that when you say that, that's completely false, because this is our stated stand. This was also the caricature that was done in Malaysia way back in 2012, and it's a very clear stand that let's not get into such caricatures. Please read what we are saying and please understand it. Let's not just talk in the air based on prejudices. So this is what somebody criticized, and this was published in The Sun, that we go for whatever is best, but it should be open to critical discourse. You cannot shut it down. And I think that is very important to keep in mind, that you should not be shutting things down. And I would like to, of course, maybe you know the Indian tradition that if you caricature a person, if you misrepresent for whatever reason, then you have just lost the argument. It's one of the 23 ways of losing the argument mentioned in the Nyaya Sutra. Right? So we need to be a little careful, and it doesn't really matter what the professed intention was. Now, I think that I want to look at the nature of Western education, of colonial education. So that is done in this book on ending academic imperialism, that if you see what Macaulay did. The Western education was church education. All your Oxford, Cambridge, and so on started as seminaries during the Crusades. Paris, Bologna, they were all seminaries meant to produce missionaries. As Isaac Barrow put it, who was Newton's mentor, and also master of Trinity College, the college is meant for the breeding of clerics. So if people learn, they cannot just be exempted, they have to serve the church. They cannot be easily exempted. So I think that we have to understand that this was basically intended as an instrument of control. Macaulay, in a speech to British Parliament in 1947, which was just a few months before the Communist Manifesto, said that, a specter is haunting Europe virtually, that you have these revolts. And the best means of controlling a revolt for the state is to give the poor free education, because it serves as an excellent means of control. It indoctrinates the mind. And he said the state is not a hangman. Your job is to protect property. You can't just hang people after they've destroyed property. You have to save it. And the way to save it is to teach them, give them education, give them this education which indoctrinates them. So this was the basic idea. And he advocated it for the British poor, he also advocated it for India. And you have the details if you just Google education and counter-revolution. That's also another article on this. But the rhetoric is that Western education is needed for science and technology. That science developed in the West, and therefore you have to imitate them. And of course, we have to look at it. Science did not develop in the West. That's this book, which is also available free of cost. You can download it. It's just false history. We'll come back to that. Now, let me just take the central point that I'm making, which I will try to explain. How do you decolonize science? Right? You have this idea that science is universal, and how can you go about decolonizing it? It's all decided, and all these authorities are sitting there and telling you there's only one way to do science. Anybody tells you anything on basis of authority, reject it. Science is empirical. All right, that's a very straightforward thing. It's empirical, it's experimental, it does not depend on authority, it does not depend on publications, it does not depend on nature and so on. I mean, nature, the journal, not nature. So, okay, I have to hold it close, right? Thank you. But the paradox is that science needs math. I hold it close. Or too close? No. Closer, thank you. So, science needs math. And what is the math we use today? Is formal math, which is anti-empirical. So, it is a paradox that you use something anti-empirical and claim it is universal. And you apply it to science, right? So, Western formal math is anti-empirical, decidedly anti-empirical, and that's the idea of, that's the basic idea that I'm proposing. There is no need for that. That is idiosyncrasy of Western mathematics, in the 20th century of total myth, falsehood about Euclid and so on, which has been perpetuated for so long. I think we need to get rid of it. And everything in Western mathematics is metaphysics of infinity. So, for example, you will start with a point, geometric point. Let's say geometric point is invisible. How many people here work with invisible points? You work with invisible points, okay. So you can see them, all right. Nobody else can see them, nobody else worked with them. So it's there in just your imagination, which you probably conflate with Platonic idealism, because the two are not the same. So we'll come back to that in the course of the discussion, right? So now this metaphysics of infinity of points on a line, and so on. Or if you look at simple thing like 1 + 1 = 2. Now the normal way of looking at it is, all right, you have one book here and one book, or one chair and one chair make two chairs. That's empirical, that's prohibited. So what do? You say, okay, you have to get to Peano's axioms, you have to get to something like that, and you have to define integers. So integers are infinitely many, so you start with infinity. And that is why Bertrand Russell took 378 pages in his Principia to prove that 1 + 1 = 2. Absolute gobbledygook, which nobody understands, and nobody ever reads, but it is authority, right? And you don't want that sort of authority which nobody understands. I think that's a major problem. That's the problem of decolonization. You need to reject it. And it is not just any metaphysics. It is a metaphysics of infinity which is related to church dogmas of eternity. You are talking, for example, about real numbers, which is a metaphysics of infinity which relates to time being, for example, like the real line. This is an important church dogma. And I think that because, the response, if I talk of metaphysics, positivism and so on, it's not that. You contest the specifics of that metaphysics which is used. I can think of 100 different metaphysics. And if you call it universal, you call it universal only on the strength of authority. So what's the process by which you decolonize science? It's a very simple process. Reject formal mathematics. Reject this anti-empirical nonsense. And I used to teach it. But then I woke up. I woke up when I built this supercomputer and I said, this is worth nothing. What am I doing? It's something completely wrong. And so I changed and I formulated something new. And so the basic paradox of an anti-empirical math being used for empirical science is resolved by reverting to normal math. Normal math is what existed for thousands of years. If things are universal, why isn't normal math universal? Why is that 20th century formal math to be treated as universal? Treat the normal math as universal. It existed for thousands of years. It is what you apply in practice. You never use formal math in practice. You cannot use real numbers. You cannot write down a single real number like square root of 2. A computer cannot use it. You use computers for all practical applications. So we revert to normal math, which admits empirical proofs. And now again another caricature, oh, you have to do everything empirically. Not at all. It admits empirical proof and inference. That is zeroism, and this happened to exist 22,500 years ago, long before the advent of so-called science, like the experimental method. Piazi, 2,500 years ago, performed 30 experiments. The innovation of the West was that you are restricted to science. In India, this was applied to the soul. Piazi's 30 experiments were about the existence of the soul. He was a skeptic. So we revert to normal math, and it makes math easy. As you heard, 5-day course in calculus. It makes it very easy because you don't want all this metaphysical junk. It's just an add-on, a completely redundant add-on. If I want to do a practical problem, I want to send a rocket to the moon, I'll compute with a computer. I'll do a numerical calculation. And there is no other way to do it. And if I do that, then I'm going to use a different number system and so on. I don't need the formal math. So I can get all the practical applications that I want. How did you work? Did you work with dots in your class, or did you work with in school? Or did you work with invisible points? Please, yes? Did anybody, apart from you worked with invisible points, everybody else worked with dots. So if you work with dots which are visible, that is the practical part. But you never talk about it. You talk something else. So the talk and the practice differ. And you don't need the talk. You don't need the polemics which goes with it. You don't need that metaphysics which goes with it. So we revert to normal math. That makes math easy, and it makes science better. It makes science better, as in a better theory of gravitation. Newton got it wrong because he misunderstood the calculus. Of course, he did not invent it. That's just a complete fraud. So I will go into as much detail as you like. Depending on how much time I get, I can sit till the middle of the night. I have no problem. All right? Now, common doubt that is articulated. Common doubt, oh, it works. So you have to ask what works. You can't just take a black box and say it works. So what works is the normal math. As I said, you're working with dots, you're working with computers, you're working with floating point numbers and so on, and you're doing that. That is what works. And that will continue to work because that's part of normal math. So the whole thing is, the idea is that the West imported most of the math that it has got from Egypt, from India. It imported it and it applied a metaphysics, it added on a metaphysics to it. So it imported it for practical value. For example, calculus was imported because it was used to get precise trigonometric values, and they were needed to solve the European problem of navigation for latitude, longitude, loxodromes. And of course, that is all, the details are here in this 500-page book. Dr. Laurie says that Prof. Raju does not provide evidence. It is all here. Please read it. It's very much there, the evidence of what Clavius did, what Fermat did, Fermat's challenge problem, your Stirling's thing, the whole lot is there, Tycho Brahe's Tychonic model and so on. So I don't want to go into all that detail. We can discuss the evidence for that. The point is that the Western understanding is inferior because they copied. And like all people who copy, you know what happens with the student who copies? Doesn't understand. Right? So that is what happened. And that is there in all cases. It's a simple thing like zero. The word zero comes from cipher, So mysterious code, because they got the thing from, they called it Arabic numeral, they got it. Pope Gerbert did not understand it. He was Gerbert, Pope Sylvester too. And then the Florentine merchants had a problem, therefore they put in a law that if you use these fancy Arabic numerals, you better also write it in words, because you can add any number of zeros and you have a contract for, say, 120 rand, you make it into 12 million rand, just going on adding number of zeros. So what is this mysterious entity? Zero, which you cannot, which has no value in itself, but adds any amount of value to the preceding number. So there were all these problems. There were similar problems with trigonometry. The very word sine comes from Arabic jab, which is a misreading, kojiba. And the very word trigonometry is conceptually confused. It's not trigonometry. It's not opposite side by hypotenuse. It's not about a triangle. It's about a circle. And ja or jiva is about a circle. They are circular functions, sine, cosine, and so on. And so you teach something wrong all the time because that was the way the West learnt it. And they made mistakes, plenty of mistakes. They made mistakes about the calculus, and so that is what needs to be changed. So what to do? And I think 2, 3, 4 things that I have written out. I would like to go through. This whole thing, by the way, is available online for anybody who's interested. The full details are posted here. And you don't have to really remember the URL. You just remember the directory. It's an open directory, ckraju.net/papers. Search for UCT there, and you will find this. So that's not a problem, right? So no need to remember the URL. So what are the things we are talking about? The first thing we are talking about is that if we want to talk of decolonization, there is no space to talk about it. I must congratulate Professor Loretta Feris for organizing this discussion, because such a discussion taking place itself is almost anathema. You won't be allowed to talk. And if you're not allowed to talk, you won't, people are unwilling to discuss, then that creates a major problem. And that is, for example, this has happened in many cases. The point is, this gives political control in the hands of the West, and they are bound to misuse it. They cannot be trusted. They have been stealing everything in the world, including 3 large continents. So we have to overthrow that political control to decolonize. We have to overthrow that authority to decolonize. And I can just give you some quick examples. If you remember last year, I had written an article on the decolonization of math. And it was in response to an article by one Karen Brody of Witwatersrand University. She said that much, though certainly not all, mathematics is the work of dead white men. And she said that blacks and women are bad at maths, and therefore the solution is, you let them start thinking like the people who created it, the white men. It's absolutely obnoxious. And I wrote against it, and it was in the conversation, and it had 17K hits. And I offered a challenge prize. If you don't like what I'm saying, collect the prize for serious evidence about Euclid. They tell these stories, they've been telling these stories for 7 centuries without the slightest bit of evidence. I provide evidence. The West never provided us 40,000 rand on stake. I put my money where my mouth is. Whatever little money I have. Okay, so this is what I offered. But nobody claimed it. They just censored it, took it off. And it still survives. It was republished in Science 2.0, where they asked this question, was Euclid a black woman? Because I said there is no evidence he was a man, there's no evidence he was white skinned. And so that's the black woman I have on the cover with fire in her eyes. And it's a very serious possibility. I'm not just talking in the air, because in history you work with balance of probabilities. And if she was from Africa, Alexandria, an African continent, probably she was black. So I won't go into all the details. There's a whole book, as you can see. And the point is that this article was republished in the Journal of Black Studies to look at, so obviously if you want that ritual of peer review somehow sanitizes it, well, the ritual is there, the whole article is published, so now you can test it. So it is very, people are not willing to contest it. That's the problem. They are unable to contest it. This is known, this is not something new. The leading Western expert on Greek history, David Fowler, he admitted it some 17 years ago in a discussion which took place on that Historia Mathematica mailing list. Somebody said, who is this C.K. Raju? He is saying that this Euclid, much is attributed to him without evidence. Will some historian tell us what is known about Euclid? So he gave a reply. What is known about Euclid? Nothing. Right? This is what David Fowler said. Nothing is known about him. And what is known about the works? Well, they are closer in time to us than to the supposed time of Euclid. That is a response on the net. In this, you can take a look. And these are just myths which don't have the which don't have the slightest evidence. Where is this? I have a recent article on mathematics and censorship on Kafila. And this is the article which was censored. To decolonize math, stand up to its false history and bad philosophy. which was completely, some people went berserk. They could not tolerate what was being said. But it has to be said, right? You produce the evidence, or now where is the Kapila article gone? I can't find it. So never mind. You just Google math and censorship and you will get the article, right? It will come on the top, so that should not be a problem. Okay, so the important point is there must be space to articulate dissent, and there must be proper debate on it. And as she said, it's not a one-time debate. This is something which we record, we go ahead with it. And I think that this is one case. Well, there's another case. As was mentioned, if you look at Sir Michael Atiyah, most reputed mathematician in the world, he has both the Fields Medal and the Abel Prize, and is president of the Royal Society. So my books and papers critiqued Einstein and corrected him. And they were published by Kluwer. This is the book published by Kluwer, 1994. The Sage book I don't have. I can't carry everything. And on Einstein's centenary, he said, okay, he repeated my claim and just added, his original part was to say, don't forget that I suggested it. That was the bottom line, right? That was his original contribution. And then he was informed. After he was informed, he again got an article, he connived to get an article published in the Notices of the American Mathematical Society, Sir Michael Atiyah on the Nature of Space. And then they called it Atiyah's hypothesis. They named it like that because they said nobody cares who actually did it. They just go by the name, and that's what you publish in the notices. This is Bertrand Russell, and this is the geometric points. And this is what I'm trying to say. I think I missed them all. Never mind. Okay, so this is the book, and this is what they eventually Notices of American Mathematical Society published. We encourage people to read C.K. Raju's work, and Atiyah also formulated something similar, and so on and so forth. And they acknowledged it because they said, if you don't acknowledge it, your book does not exist. You acknowledge it, what a great thing we have done, and your ethics that we have, published ethics, doesn't apply to you. All right, so this is what happened. And this was after he was personally informed 2 times, once by my son, once by me. And he responded to that. So this is what happens. And let me go back. I have lost the thread. Yeah, so this is what the editor of the AMS did. There was a petition and so on, 50 people, including a fellow of the Royal Society, and refused to publish an apology, although it was in clear violation of the ethics, published ethics of the Notices of the AMS. So this is what happens when you have political control. You don't allow anything to be articulated. I said the thing is erroneous. There is no hypothesis needed. Why do you talk about your hypothesis? At least correct it. No, we won't correct it. What are you going to do about it? The journal belongs to us, right? So the most reputed also cannot be trusted. It's the top journal in the field, read by the widest, read by the entire mathematics community. It cannot be trusted. The editor cannot be trusted, and this is what they do. So I think, for example, look at the present panel. It would have been impossible in the days of apartheid. So if you had that political control, you cannot imagine. Can you imagine this discussion taking place in the days of apartheid? It's just impossible. So I think when we look at that, you have to do that. And there is, of course, all this false history of science that Greeks did this. No, there is no evidence for Euclid. There is no evidence for Archimedes. Or silly evidence 1800 years after him in another language, in another place. What is this? You call this evidence? I can take a book in English from London on aerodynamics and say this was done in Africa in the 3rd century. Similar thing. What bad thing? How do you know? Well, you have to have faith. You have to have faith in authority, you know what you do. No further evidence needed. That's the evidence for Archimedes. And it goes on like that. Everything is like that. So I don't want to dwell on that again. But, well, maybe I do have something about it here. That basically it is false history which developed during the Crusades. Then it was picked up by racists, and then racist historians, and then it was picked up by colonial historians. So they made some minor changes, but basically, I'm running out of time. Oh, Mike, okay. Okay, so this book, of course, debunks these 4 chaps hanging upside down. Have I got it right side up? Okay. So these they are Euclid, Claudius Ptolemy, Copernicus, and Newton. So Copernicus, as you know, copied from Ibn Shatir, and he didn't understand what he copied. It's a usual story. So there is much counter evidence against the existence of these figures. Whether it is Euclid or whatever, you know there is not a single thing to be found. You find people saying the book is written by Theon, or based on the lectures of Theon, who comes 800 years after Euclid, and so on. For Ptolemy, I've discussed it in great detail, so I don't want to go into it. I just want to say that there is much counter. For example, you know, Ptolemy is supposed to be in the 2nd century. And at the top of his star list, you will find the present-day pole star, which was not the pole star in his time. Because scientific texts are accretive. And to say that they are not accretive and everything is verbatim like that and people just copied it for posterity, it's ridiculous. People do, they use scientific texts for their work, for what they need. And so if they need it for navigation, well, pole star is on top, because in the 9th century, 10th century, it started becoming the pole star. So then, of course, the story Euclid did math in a special way, complete nonsense. Look at the book. There is not a single pure deductive proof in the book from the first to the last proposition. The first proposition is proved empirically, the 4th proposition is proved empirically, the Sass theorem, and therefore all the propositions of the Pythagorean theorem, so-called, which is the 47th proposition, uses that. So from 1125, when the book first came to Europe, till about 2000, till about 1900, they kept on propagating this story. Finally, in 1900, it was admitted, oh yes, Euclid intended to do that. You don't know anything about Euclid. You understand his intentions. You don't know what. He writes a different book, and you say, no, we know his intentions better than he did. So very convenient if the person does not exist. And then eventually, Russell and Hilbert admitted, Russell will write, oh, Euclid makes so many errors. This is what he intended, but he couldn't do that. And then they both write big books on the foundations of geometry, Hilbert on synthetic geometry and so on, which try to, you know, take that agenda forward. What is the agenda? Of doing anti-empirical mathematics. And I don't care about the distinction between logicism and formalism. I don't care about the quibble. They are both doing anti-empirical mathematics. So far as I am concerned, they are the same, and that I have written that in a footnote in my article. Maybe you can take a look. Okay, so what's the claim? I mean, there's a similar kind of thing because this thing is important, because why are we told to do calculus this way? Newton did it like that. He invented the calculus, so imitate him. That's what is stated in Indian texts, school texts. Euclid did mathematics in some special sort of way. I asked, what is the evidence for Euclid? No evidence. We go by a committee. We don't care for evidence. So that's what they actually said. That's what the NCRT, which is our central government organization, said. The head of the maths department came for my seminar and said that. We go by a committee. Why do you want evidence? Why do you want primary evidence? We don't have, we don't care for it. So the idea is that the other part is that you get a bad philosophy as a result of false history. So Euclid did pure deductive proofs, so you should do pure deductive proofs. This is, why deductive proofs are infallible. Now, how can you say that? The book Elements itself was considered a model of deductive proofs, and it was a wrong model. So from 1125 till 1900, how many years is that? Approximately 800 years. All the scholars in the West who read it, because it was part of the church syllabus, it was part of the Cambridge curriculum. All of them read it. Oh, so it's such great empirical proof, deductive proof, infallible. That itself shows that an invalid deductive proof can be mistaken for a valid one. And all the scholars made that mistake for 800 years. You can't have an empirical proof which is so fallible. If you mistake a rope for a snake, then what are you going to do? I mean, you will be able to resolve the error very quickly. So no such, mistakes don't persist like that. It's easier to deceive the mind than to deceive the senses. So that is where we are. Now, the other part I would like to stress is that when we return to pro-empirical normal math, the way calculus developed in India, I have the book there, the way it developed as the numerical solution of differential equations, the way it developed with non-Archimedean arithmetic used to sum infinite series, something which Europeans didn't understand, and they always have to refer only to themselves. So this existed and makes math extremely easy, makes calculus very intuitive, very simple. The original is better than the copy. It's as simple as that. And those who copy make mistakes. I have repeated that. So The calculus reform is the key to decolonize science, because all science is formulated in terms of calculus. A whole lot of science, at least, is formulated in terms of calculus. Every equation of physics, the equations of physics are written down using calculus. So if you change calculus, you change the formulation of physics. Let me give an example, because it may not be clear what I'm talking about. Let's take gravitation. Now, if you look at Newton, when he tried to understand the calculus, he had a problem. And he said Leibniz had a problem, but he himself had a problem. He used fluxions. What are these fluxions which you never use today? Fluxions means something flowing. What is flowing? Time is flowing. Now, saying time, he says that in his Principia, that absolute, true, and mathematical time flows on without regard to anything external. So, without regard to anything external means it is pure metaphysics. Now, how do you do physics with metaphysical notion of time? That was the central conceptual problem. And what do you mean by time flowing? If time flows, there must be another time within which it flows. Things can flow in time. Time itself cannot flow. And it is a recognized fallacy. Again, if you look in Western philosophy, Mechtagard's paradox. In India, it occurs 1,000 years before Mechtagard with Srihat. And there are quotations here. Srihat's Khandan Khanda Khadya. It brought about a major change in Indian philosophy. The Nyaya system was completely gone, and Navya Nyaya started because of Sriharsha's criticism. Khandan Khanda Khadya means chopping up your opponent's arguments into bits and eating them up. That is the meaning of the title of this book. So Newton misunderstood the calculus, and therefore because he thought he has the laws of nature. He said, what are these laws of nature? I mean, is this science to talk of laws of nature? That's the first lesson we teach. Is it a scientific belief that there are eternal laws of nature? It's a church dogma articulated by Aquinas in Summa Theologica. He says that, and this has happened because a particular theological dispute was settled in one way in Christianity and in another way in Islam. So this dispute about change is discussed in my book in great detail in 11 Pictures of Time. I won't go into that. The point is that the belief in eternal laws of nature is not refutable. There's no way to test. How do you know that something is going to last for eternity? It's a matter of faith. The belief in laws of nature is totally disrupted by our everyday observation. Human beings are not mechanical. So that's the distinction between a transcendent God and an immanent God. You attribute creativity to human beings, to living organisms, and this was not done in the West for various political reasons. It's nothing really religious, it's all political. So the idea of laws of nature, the idea of Newton's laws, which you teach as the first lesson in science, involves a superstition, which we need to throw out. That there are no laws of nature. You have fallible models. I have no problem with fallible models. Make fallible models and keep making them, no problem. But if you declare they are universal, where are they now? They're gone. 100 years ago they went. Now if you change, if you throw away, why did they go? Because Newton did not define a measure of time. He did not define what's a proper clock. Newton's first law says a thing, a body continues in its state of rest or uniform motion unless acted up. Did I bring the house down? So Newton's first law says that uniform motion. Now, what do you mean by uniform motion? How are you going to refute it? So you cannot refute it because you need a clock. Which clock will you use? My heartbeats or yours? And it's like metaphysics. I declare my heartbeats to be universal and use it. That's a different matter. So I have to use a particular clock. And those clocks worked as approximations until electrodynamics came. And that is when Poincaré proposed that you should use clock, you should define it in a way which is most convenient, and therefore declare the speed of light to be constant. He postulated it, and the theory of relativity follows, which he derived. But the Newton's law of motion is not refutable. Now, despite my differences with Popper, and I hold on to my differences with Popper, which he said he would respond to, but he never managed to respond to it because he died. So, so there is no response, which is a good thing. But despite that, I am using the criterion of refutability as a concession. I really want to be experimentally refutable, but it's all right. Logical refutability will do for the time being. So there is no way to refute this as it stands, Newton's laws of motion, because the second law is a definition of force. Unless I have an external definition of force, I cannot refute it. And so you have to put the two things together in order to get refutability. This Popper talks about in Realism and the Aim of Science. As versus the Galilean parabola, you have a Newtonian ellipse. And therefore, it becomes refutable if you combine these two. Point I'm making is, if you change Newtonian physics, why? Because he misunderstood the calculus and got a wrong definition of time. He wanted things to be perfect because he's talking of laws. He's talking of divine laws which were revealed to him. In his book, he actually cancels, in his notes, he cancels hypothesis and wrote Lek. So he believes that, and when he does that, he wants that these divine laws, eternal laws, must be in the perfect language of mathematics. And to make mathematics perfect, he then says time must be metaphysical. D by dt makes sense only if time flows like this. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And today we say it makes sense only if we have real numbers. Completely wrong. You can do it in so many other ways. You can do it with floating point numbers. You can do it with non-Archimedean arithmetic and so on. So the thing is that you have to modify also the theory of gravitation, because the two come as a package deal. And when you modify the theory of gravitation, then you make it relativistically covariant. That's the simplest way of doing it. I forgot this Euclid, father of geometry, and I forgot about Mather's sine tables. This is why these were sine tables, extremely accurate sine tables, which were copied by Clavius, and they were used for determining the Mercator chart, loxodromes. That was the most important thing those days, but they couldn't find their way. Well, you have the sum of infinite geometric series given in this way. So let me come to retarded gravitation theory. It's a very simple theory that you just make it Lorentz covariant in the simplest way possible. It's a linear thing. So you just make it, you just assume that the force depends linearly on these two. And so you get some expression like this. It looks a bit complicated. Let me make it simple. And this is the kind of expression you get as an approximate thing. So what's the new feature here? The new feature here is that if I want a Lorentz covariant theory of gravitation, then it cannot be purely position dependent. I cannot have an inverse square law which depends only on position. It must depend on velocity. You cannot have something which is Lorentz covariant only a function of position. So it depends on the velocity. It's a small effect, V by C effect, but it is something which you can observe. Because if you have the Earth rotating, then its rotation is going to affect the motion of nearby satellites. And so it depends on retarded position, of course, not instantaneous position. It's not just an ordinary differential equation. It is a retarded functional differential equation or a delayed differential equation. It doesn't have to be retarded. It could also be advanced. That's why I call functional differential equations. It's velocity dependent. So if we look at you expect that the rotation of the Earth will affect the trajectories of nearby spacecraft at the V by C level, and you observe that it's called the NASA flyby anomaly, and it's a very tiny effect, extremely tiny effect, and this is the thing for the spacecraft Galileo when it flew past Earth, the first flyby of Galileo, and you get something which is very close to what is observed, and this is for Cassini, the same Cassini which just committed suicide on Saturn. And there was a certain loss for the Cassini spacecraft when it flew past Earth. So this is there are further tests, lots of further tests. For example, you have two rotating satellites, one rotating in the direction of the Earth, one in the other direction. Not a very difficult experiment to perform, and so it is refutable. It's experimentally testable. But the point is, more important point, this is a very tiny effect. More important point is that Newton's law is universal. There's such small creatures in such a vast cosmos, and you have the arrogance to call it universal. No, I mean this sort of thing is it doesn't work beyond the solar system. It fails for the galaxy. We've known that it fails for about 100 years. Newtonian gravitation does not work. So what do? Pile on a hypothesis. If you don't have evidence for Euclid, pile on a hypothesis. Now that is why I like Popper's criterion, because at least it helps you to erase all these piled on hypotheses. All right, it's a straightforward way of throwing out those piled on hypotheses. So we say dark matter. Right? On Newtonian gravitation, the velocity, if you have stars in the galaxy, they should fall off as 1 by square root of r, the way it happens with planetary motion. Accurate for the solar system. But this was back calculated from observations that were made over thousands of years. But in spiral galaxies, you observe something opposite, that the rotation velocity of the stars increases and then becomes constant, completely opposite to what behavior you expect. And so you say it's dark matter. But where's the dark matter? We can't find it. But it's very reputable physics. It is published by various journals and so on, and you have no evidence for it, but you keep searching. It gives jobs to lots of people. No problem about that. So this failure, you can't, and this is how is it distributed? Dark matter might exist. It's distributed like a halo around the galaxy, where the luminous matter thins out to nothing, there the dark matter keeps. So point is, if you change mathematics, if you change calculus, it changes physics in a fundamental way, and there are plenty of other ways it happens. So, well, let me skip this. I have lost track of where I'm going. All right. So this is one example. There is another example which I can give of Stephen Hawking. And this is what I was telling the students today, that why don't you challenge Stephen Hawking? Why don't you challenge what this Tipler says, who's published 6 papers in Nature? And what does he say? He says that Judeo-Christian theology is true and can be proved on the strength of present-day physics. Right? This is what he says. So this is his book, Physics of Immortality. And if you can't read the fine print, let me show it to you here. It's about modern cosmology, God, and the resurrection of the dead. And this is Tipler, and you see the table of contents. When will the dead be raised? Why will the dead be raised? Why don't you laugh at it the way you laugh at that lady who didn't know any science? This guy is supposed to be an expert physicist. He's a professor of mathematical physics in some US university. And he's talking about Stephen Hawking's work. See, what does he say? Theology is a branch of physics. And physicists can infer by calculation the existence of God and the likelihood of the resurrection of dead to eternal life, exactly the same way as they can calculate the properties of the electron. Right? This is what he says, Tipler. Well, yes. And then he says the central claims of Judeo-Christian theology are in fact true. And these claims are straightforward deductions of the laws of physics as we now understand them. So, this is the science that we are talking about, which is published in Nature, which is done by the most reputed physicist, Stephen Hawking. He does creationism, right? So he says that I have been inexorably forced into this country by the inexorable logic of global general relativity created by Penrose and Stephen Hawking. I had a debate with Penrose for 2 days. And I asked him, he just tried to slip out of the stuff. Okay, I am through almost. Now I want to say that the courses we are talking about are not imaginary courses in the air. They are actually being taught. There are textbooks, there's a whole lot of material which is available on the internet. So one of the things I'm starting with, because I'm starting with school, that calculus people may not understand. So this is on chord geometry, Egyptian chord geometry, Indian chord geometry. And this is an actual course which is run. It's being taught to those 9th standard students. And I'm showing the picture so that you are sure they are real. And if you say it is say it is photoshopped, I will give you the email addresses. All right, so you can verify. And this is in Nasik. This is a group of 40 schools. And this is in Chamarajnagar in Karnataka, where we had a workshop. And the teachers, fortunately, the school teachers are much more amenable. They are open. They say invisible points. Yes, we don't understand. Angle, two straight line, we don't understand. And so on. So they are willing to correct themselves. They say our concepts are confused. So they called in more people, and there was a repeat workshop on this. Raju Ganit. And there is a textbook in existence. It is being tried out. The field trials are going on. And so it's not anything in the air. All right, very much there. Textbook is here on my system. If anybody wants to see, can do that. Calculus without limits. So the way it developed in India as the numerical solution of differential equations. That's what you do for all applications of calculus. And if you want to sum infinite series, you use non-Archimedean arithmetic. You don't need, you use simple order counting. So this is the first course which was held in 2009 in the Central University of Tibetan Studies at Sarnath. And this is something which was done in Tehran. This was for social scientists. And this was again for social scientists, Ambedkar University, Delhi. It is, they are very happy, extremely happy. I mean, they were said we had lost confidence in ourselves because we thought we are no good at mathematics and so on. And now we find there is an easy way to do it. You see, they are all laughing. So, so this is the course which was done recently. Now this is just a small batch of students, because actual course was taken by 70 students, but this is the number which fitted into the lab. They were just happened to be a sample in the lab. Again, just to assure you that they are real, this course is there. It is online. If you go into the directory ckraju.net/HTT, you'll find all the teaching materials, the tutorial assignments, the exams, and so on. History, Philosophy of Science. Now, this was a course I taught several times in Malaysia, and these are the students once again. They were doing a simple thing, finding the radius of the Earth, which could not be found in the West. Science originated in the West. They couldn't find the radius of the Earth. Khalifa al-Mamun did it, and this is a simple technique by means of which al-Biruni did it, Indians did it. So they go to the sea and they observe the angle of dip of the setting sun, and you calculate the radius of the Earth if you happen to know some trigonometry, which Christoph Clavius did not know, though he published trigonometric tables, so-called, to a precision of 10 decimal places, copied from India, of course. So this is the History, Philosophy of Science 2, because the course became very popular and the students wanted a second course on that to go into details. So this is a batch, and they got so interested that even when the university shut down, they were there coming forward to study it. So that is about all. I think I have kept my time, more or less. Thank you very much.